Who is the poet? This is a continuation of our conversations about Ralph Waldo Emerson's work this week, culminating in his essay, The Poet. Throughout the semester, we've been studying some essential questions in how speakers in poems and narrators in prose respond to these questions. What is nature? What is God or the divine? What is literature? What is significant about who participates and who observes? In our studies of Emerson, we added a few more. What is a scholar? What is the common man? Or who is the common man? What is the soul? And what is meaning? Emerson's essay, The Poet, introduces us to a new question. Who is the poet? Or what is the poet's craft? Or what is the poet's purpose? Did you find answers to those questions in the essay that you read? I found about 9, maybe 10 or 11. How many do you remember? Let's see. I found representative of all men, the namer or language maker who represents beauty, teller of news, a singer, conveyor of nature's picture language, capable of reattaching things to nature and the whole, one who uses symbols originally, a genius, liberating gods. But like all of the questions that we've been talking about, particularly with Emerson, you were right to think, well, oftentimes these questions kind of lead to new questions. So there's never really a full answer or full response to the question. Let's take a look at an example of that. So Emerson says, the poet is representative of all men. And we might ask, well, okay, how can the poet as representative convey reality or actuality if, as he is only the teller of news for that which he was present and privy to the appearance which he describes? Appearance through another's eyes is more illusion than reality, right? And Emerson might respond, well, it's not illusion because the poet reattaches things to nature and the whole. Think about the common nouns and the way that Emerson capitalizes them, because often there's meaning behind that. And we might respond then, how can the artificial be reattached to the whole when the poet uses deeper insight to dispose very easily of the most disagreeable facts? Certainly, disposing of facts based on an individual's evaluation of those facts must lack veracity. Emerson might respond, well, the poet's naming is neither false nor true. Instead, it is genius, or the activity which repairs the decay of things. Genius comes from insight driven by imagination, which constitutes a very high sort of seeing by the intellect, being where and what it sees, by sharing the path or circuit of things through form, and so making them translucent to others. Okay, but then if real sight or insight linked to imagination must pass through a circuit of things, how can it convey truth? As Emerson concludes in The Poet, this is the reward, that the ideal shall be real to thee. Thou shalt not be able to find a condition inopportune or ignoble, incapable of conveying truth. Another way to think about this is to read Emerson through Derrida, who was a philosopher, and by no means am I saying that Emerson was informed by Derrida. Certainly there's a century or more between them. But it's interesting to kind of think about how this philosopher and critic thought about questioning and kind of the role of questioning the text. So Derrida has a philosophical approach or critical lens that he calls deconstruction. And deconstruction is kind of what it does. It keeps deconstructing the text. And if you think about this, it's really a rabbit hole in the Alice in Wonderland sense, because it can keep going on and on. There's a couple of phases to it. And in the first phase, there's kind of this reversal of hierarchies or playing with hierarchies, like the visible versus the sensible, or essence versus appearance, or living memory versus rote memory, or good versus evil. If you reduce something, such as reducing the essence found in appearance, it becomes essence mixed into appearance. They're not necessarily in opposition to one another in the same way that we just kind of went through those questions from the poet. But each kind of new question or each new perspective on a question gives us a new insight that builds then into either further questions or further insights or further kind of movements between our initial perspective on meaning and our developing perspective on that meaning. The second step is kind of a reversal reduction. And I kind of think of it in terms of memory and the experience of the present. I've underlined here from this quick encyclopedia piece. There is always a small difference between the moment of nowness and the past and the future. We can't decide if we're experiencing a memory or a present perception, if we're experiencing a present perception or an anticipation. Certainly, the early experiments, like Bartlett, for instance, who is considered one of the fathers of cognitive psychology, talks about this in his experiment. I think it was called War of the Ghosts. He had students come and read a story, and then each year they came back and tried to remember what it was about. Over a period of about a decade, every time students came back, they told their memory of that story just a little bit different. And that's important, right? Because when we remember something, we're not remembering that actual experience. We're remembering contextualized experience or our perceptions of that memory of experience that are changed, are reconfigured, are reframed over time with the new experiences and perceptions that we go through in our lifetime. And so it really gets at the temporal nature, as this article points out here, of our experience and our perception and our engagement with both of those things. Another way I like to think about this are Escher prints. I often share these to kind of explain this. Take a second to look at a couple of these prints. There's this redoubling. For instance, if you look at the self-portrait, you're looking at Escher within the sphere, but you're also looking at Escher's hand holding the sphere. And so your mind is constantly negotiating between those two perspectives and making meaning between them. Let's apply this to a poem that Emerson wrote called Each and All. Take a moment. I didn't embed the video because oftentimes that doesn't work the way I want it to when I record these videos. But I did at the top of the screen here provide a link so that you can listen to this poem. Take a moment, and listen to the poem. Now apply some of the things that we've been talking about to your thinking about this poem. First of all, you may want to begin with a Derrida type reading, thinking about where binaries, and they're not necessarily full binaries like good versus bad. Sometimes they are, but sometimes they're kind of like a slant rhyme. They're sort of opposites, but not fully opposite. So think about how relationships are put together. In a light purple kind of pen, I noted a few of these. All are needed by each one. Nothing is fair or good alone. Or beauty through my senses stole. I yielded myself to the perfect whole. Also, think about the structure of this poem. We have kind of a statement here, an experience, and then the third portion is a restatement or a new perception of what is the whole. So here are some questions to consider. How are relationships between parts and wholes conveyed in the poem? To what extent are beauty and truth interdependent? Or are they self-reliant, as we were discussing earlier today? And how does the perfect whole evolve through the three phases of the speaker's kind of journey through perception and experience? And then the last question relates to the poet essay that we read for class today, and one of those answers to what is the poet. How does the poet reattach things to nature and to the whole. What does it mean to be whole? All right, we'll carry some of these conversations into next week as we begin with some of the other authors in this group. But in the meantime, spend some time contemplating some of these concepts, and I look forward to our conversation soon.